Have you ever played Hollow Knight but wished that the entire game felt like Deep Nest? Instead of hacking and slashing through bugs, would you rather be running in sheer panic from them? Do you think it would be cool and interesting if cancer could sprout legs and try to eat you? Do you wish that rodents could produce explosions at will? Do you think that Shinji from Evangelion should have been a green squirmel? Do you still have daydreams about that squirrel getting disemboweled by a hawk, but think it would be better if the hawk had melted it with heat vision? Well, welcome back to Rain World Downpour is a huge expansion DLC, nearly doubling the region count of the base game and adding 5 new slugcats with unique abilities and, get this, an actual plotline. Before I get into the DLC itself, I should at least mention the remix options which are added to the game for free alongside its release. This is sort of an addendum to my first video, as the majority of my few grievances with the game can actually be resolved in the remix options. First of all, there's a checkbox for stronger bottomless pit indicators. I complained about the hard-to-read nature of Rain World's death drops, as the game's camera system requires you to drop into potentially deadly pits to figure out whether you can go there at all or not. What kills you and what doesn't is usually fairly intuitive, but there are a few places where it gets a bit muddy and the indicator for deadly drops is very, let's say, subtle, to the point that I could not notice it even after knowing it existed. This option makes it a bit better, and at least possible to see. Second, key item tracking and key items on passage. Normally, colored pearls containing lore are a huge pain in the ass to read because you have to haul them across the map at most 3 at a time, if you want to sacrifice both hands, and if they were lost along the way, they would be permanently removed from your save. Key item tracking makes them respawn if lost and appear on your map so you can find them again. Key items on passage makes your fast travel take all of your unique items in your shelter with you, instead of only being able to keep whatever is stored in your stomach, meaning you can hoard as many pearls as you want inside a shelter and instantly take all of them with you to your intended destination. This makes finding the pearls much more bearable, and made me actually want to find them. These options also apply to a few other irreplaceable items, but pearls are the big one. Third, loading screen tips and extra tutorials. This lowers the barrier to entry by explicitly telling you some of the less intuitive game mechanics, which I will concede removes a bit of the game's mystique, but I think it's a really nice thing to opt into if you want some help but don't just want to open the wiki. Fourth, and finally, reindeer AI improvement. You can wiggle on their antlers to make them get up and change directions so you aren't 100% dependent on their AI, and are now only 70% dependent on it. The reindeer can still go to hell where they belong. There's lots of other things in the remix options to modify your experience, and I think it's good to have the option to soften some of Rain World's harder edges if you really want to. But that's enough about that, let's get to the proper DLC stuff. For the sake of my own sanity, I'm going to assume that you've played through the base game of Rain World at least once and enjoyed it for what it is. There will be comparisons and references to the base game content that will not make much sense without context. I will do my best to avoid spoilers for the story of Downpour in here, but there will inevitably be spoilers for the base game, including the ending, which should really be experienced firsthand. If you have no idea what Rain World is and have somehow landed on this video anyway, first of all, how did you even find this? Second, go watch my review of the base game first to see if you would enjoy it spoiler-free before coming back here. If you don't understand what all these images mean and are at all interested in playing the base game, you should probably click off. Now, let's get started by talking about the Whoa, hey, that's not the usual format. What about the presentation or whatever, I hear my straw man of you ask? Well, the topic of this video is an expansion / DLC of a game I've already covered. I don't see a point in talking ad nauseum about how beautiful and unique this game looks and plays when that's more to do with the base game than Downpour. That being said, the new parts of the map added by Downpour are really visually impressive. In the years that have followed Rain World's release, the team behind Downpour have clearly been honing their map-making skills, and have met, or even exceeded, the quality found in the base game. I feel that the new regions also stack up well gameplay-wise. It's almost enough to simply have new places to explore, but also just for practicality, there are new connections between previously distant regions. The pipe yard acts as a nice crossroads between the 4 corners of the map, even if it isn't my favorite in terms of raw gameplay. The only issue I have had is that some of the more visually busy regions can heavily obscure tunnels, pipes, and platforms more than the base game ever did, making readability a bit of a nightmare sometimes. But those obfuscations are few and far between, and the new regions more than make up for in pure visual style. This feat is even more impressive when you consider that Downpour nearly doubles a region count with 10 new regions to explore. Well, saying that is maybe a bit deceptive. There are 10 new regions, but many are only accessible in certain campaigns, either because a specific slugcat's unique abilities allow it to reasonably access them, or, for story reasons, they simply don't exist for anyone else. For instance, there's a region Rivulet has to cross in their campaign that is almost entirely submerged in water, but due to Rivulet's vastly improved swimming speed and lung capacity, they can traverse it just fine. This region is technically still accessible to Survivor, Monk, Hunter, and Gourmand, but you may notice that there's no air in these rooms. Those four can traverse the region with great difficulty, but there's no reason besides bragging rights and self-flagellation to do it. However, this is an exception to the rule. Most of the new regions are strictly exclusive to one or two of the new slugcats, and do not exist outside their respective campaigns. At a surface level, this kinda sucks to hear. The base game slugcats got the short end of the stick with only 2 new reasonably accessible regions and 1 new sub-region stuck to the ass end of Chimney Canopy, but let me tell you, it's really worth it. Pipe Yard is fine as a traversal option, but the other that I can't show you because I'm counting it as a spoiler is frankly one of the most breathtaking regions in the game. And, hear me out, I think having regions restricted to specific slugcats has an actual benefit. Every Downpour slugcat gets at least one unique region only accessible to them that was specifically crafted to play into their unique capabilities and would just not work well for the others. Like, as I said, the underwater region for the Rivulet, or this platforming design for the Artificer, or, nothing I can show for the Saint. Ugh, it's gonna be so hard to talk about the Saint. So let's start easy by talking about the Gourmand is the most straightforward, but also the most mechanically complex of the new slugcats. I'm guessing their campaign is designed to get old players refamiliarized with Rain World in preparation for the rest of Downpour, and therefore is largely similar to the base game's campaigns. With that in mind, some prior map knowledge will be extremely helpful for beating Gourmand with minimal backtracking. I recommend that you at least try a run or two of Hunter before starting Gourmand. Partly for the map knowledge, partly for a fun surprise, and partly so you can encounter some hard mode enemies because Gourmand's campaign can be rough if you're just coming out of Survivor. While not as ball-bustingly difficult as Hunter, Gourmand does pose a challenge due to their unique traits and plenty of hard mode enemies to find along the way. Who the fuck decided to put a king vulture in goddamn Shoreline? This is actually the easiest of the new campaigns too. Yahoo! You may have noticed at this point that Gourmand is rather plus-sized. This is because they have to eat 7 food pips per cycle to not starve. For those not keeping track, that's the entirety of Survivor's maximum. In compensation, the Gourmand can eat both regular food and corpses like the Hunter. They can also make a meal out of 2 different food types for an extra food pip. With how generally abundant food is in Rain World, doubly so if you go the carnivore route, food is rarely an issue despite Gourmand's increased demand. And now for how Gourmand gets complicated. Most of their unique attributes are centered around their supreme rotundness. Most obviously, they are physically much heavier, which means shorter jumps, slower climbing, louder walking, and shortness of breath. Well, that's all pretty bad, isn't it? Well, there is one obvious benefit to being very heavy. Just get some height above something you don't like, and let physics do the rest. As it turns out, Gourmand is actually a bit of a combat powerhouse, capable of pulling off WWE wrestling moves on predators and stomping them into the pavement. Rolling or sliding as a Gourmand carries you much further than any slugcat, and hitting any living thing in the middle of your roll or slide will stun it and do damage. Just be careful around things you don't want to pancake. If crushing spines under your immense weight isn't working out for you, there's also good old-fashioned spears, which the Gourmand can launch like a bulbous ballista, doing 3 times the damage of a normal hit and throwing you forward with its momentum, instantly exhausting you. On that point, the Gourmand can actually make up for their relatively poor maneuverability with some help from their throw. Throw boosting is a tech that any slugcat can use to get a bit of extra distance on a jump, but Gourmand's spear throw launches them. Combine this with the normal throw boost for unmatched horizontal jumps, except maybe by Rivulet, but that's cheating. Just be careful when throwing spears near ledges. Gourmand's final notable ability is that they can craft. If you take 2 different items, you can try and combine them into a single new object. There is no indication of what and what makes what, so either guess and experiment and hope you get something useful, or look at the wiki. With the right ingredients, Gourmand can make just about any item in the game, including, somehow, living creatures. To assist with that somewhat, the Gourmand can also regurgitate a random item at the cost of 1 food pip. The list of possible items for regurgitation is relatively small and based on random chance, but the more important thing is that this ability creates an empty food pip, for reasons I'll get back to in a second. The Gourmand also serves as an introduction to a new concept added by Downpour: alternate endings. With Downpour, every slugcat can get an ending other than Ascension, with the exception of Hunter, whose only other path is dying horrifically. These endings are obtained after completing their slugcat's story mission. Gourmand's is one of the more straightforward, and the only one I feel I can talk about in depth without getting into spoiler territory. The Gourmand's quest is, perhaps unsurprisingly, to eat. Above your hunger pips is a series of icons indicating what you've already eaten, and a flashing icon of your next recommended target. You do not have to do this quest in the order it's given to you, but the recommendations lead you through the regions in a way that makes finding all your targets relatively easy. Your starting few quest items are Slime Mold, Blue Fruit, Batfly, Mushroom, and Black Lizard, all easily found in your starting area of Shaded Citadel. Unfortunately, this does mean you have to spend time in Shaded Citadel. But what if you've stuffed your face with flies, fruit, and fungus, and have managed to bumble your way into killing a black lizard but have no room left to eat it? This is where being able to free up a food pip on command via regurgitation is handy. Just hack up a bat nip and make room for whatever else you're trying to eat. And maybe if you're lucky, you'll even cough up a psychedelic mushroom so you don't have to spend any more time wandering through Shaded looking for one. After chowing down on that lizard, your next objective is Bubble Fruit, clearly leading you to Shoreline. Then after you're done there, to Garbage Waste. So on, so forth, until your very hungry slugcat has eaten its way up through Pebbles and down to Subterranean. I feel that Gourmand mainly serves as a way to show you all the new stuff added by Downpour, like the many new types of food, including the appropriately named Gooey Duck. Hey, wait, this room wasn't down here before. In summary, Gourmand has a laundry list of abilities. All the other slugcats' ability sets are much more compact, perhaps appropriately so, and yet Gourmand has the most standard questline. Their route barely deviates from the Survivor and Monks, and in practice plays about the same as well. So, despite their seeming complexity, I would recommend playing Gourmand as your first Downpour campaign. Beating Gourmand, and optionally their food quests, unlocks the rest of the slugcats excluding Saint. That is, if you haven't already beaten the game as either Hunter or Artificer, but I recommend playing the campaigns in the order they appear on the menu. So, following the recommendation, let's move on to... The Artificer is simultaneously one of the most fun and the most frustrating campaigns in Downpour. Like the Hunter, the Artificer only gets 1/4 of a food pip from eating fruit and bat flies, and instead needs to eat corpses, therefore requiring an aggressive playstyle to survive. Also like the Hunter, they get increased movement speed and spear damage to help facilitate that aggression. However, Artificer cranks that up to 11. The Artificer's main gimmick centers around their ability to blow things the fuck up. This manifests in a number of different explosion-based abilities, the most prominent and least destructive of which is a double jump that flings you in whatever direction you want. This change alone completely alters how the game is played. Sure, it renders the majority of Rain World's platforming mechanics obsolete. I don't think I ever pounce jumped once, but the double jump is just so fun to use, and Artificer really needs it. The second most notable ability is that Artificer can turn Spear's explosive and any random rock into a grenade. This costs 1 food pip to do, but with your homemade WMDs in hand, killing things for food isn't as much of a problem. And then you can turn that corpse into more explosives to further decimate the local ecosystem. The Artificer is also immune to explosions. A bomb detonating 1 inch from their face only stuns them, so go wild. And lastly, the Artificer can create a little shockwave around themselves to stun all nearby creatures and knock projectiles out of the air. Useful for getting out of tight spots or creating an opening to attack using your maul. Oh, I guess that's the last thing. You can maul stunned enemies for a small amount of damage. It's only good as a finishing move or to kill weak creatures. Just be careful, because using your double jump and your shockwave causes the Artificer to overheat, and overheating too much will stun or even kill them. Artificer is the combat character. A lone lizard is nothing, a pack can be burst with a well-placed grenade, vultures are easy food, and you can even kill longlegs without much sweat. Hell, you can actually take down a king vulture in a straight fight, which is good because there's probably at least 1 king vulture in every region that has a sky. Yeah, there's a couple reasons Artificer is so souped up. For any other slugcat, this campaign would be near impossible, it's just how flooded the world is with hardcore predators. If you're not good at combat yet, you're going to have to get good now or die over and over and over. And even then, you should expect to die repeatedly anyway, because there's one last gimmick that is central to the Artificer that will contribute to the majority of your deaths. You are at war with the scavengers. The Artificer forces you into extreme hostilities with the scavs, which I've never ever even thought about doing in any other campaign because, frankly, it's just a horrible idea. Being friendly with them is not too hard to do and has lots of benefits, and on the other hand, having an enemy that comes in packs is bad enough. When they all have ranged weapons and explosives as well, in this game? But the Artificer is uniquely capable of standing up to them with their toolkit. Double jump to get in and out of range quickly. Use your stun to get an opening for an easy kill or retreat. Grenades can't hurt you, but they sure can hurt scavengers. Say goodbye to your squad, idiot. But just because Artificer is uniquely capable of fighting the scavs does not mean it's easy. Their range is a fairly unique threat, especially because they can throw spears at more angles than you can. They also travel in packs of 3 or more, and while they usually only take 1 spear to die, so do you. They will consistently be the most dangerous enemy you have to go up against, and you do have to go up against them. The Artificer's karma is stuck at the lowest possible, which is not very useful for opening doors. But you know whose karma is not stuck at level 0? The scavengers. Kill one, check its karma, and use its carcass to open up doors for you. Honestly, I think that being forced to fight the scavs for once is a cool shakeup. For a while. Eventually the novelty starts to wear, especially in the later parts of the campaign. Eventually there will be so many of them that they are literally raining from the sky, and all it takes is one unlucky spear to kill you, and sometimes the scavs have the aim and reaction time of a CSGO pro. This is made even worse by Artificer's second worst enemy, the camera. Remember how I complained that sometimes you can just walk into the mouth of a predator just off screen and not even have a chance to react? Well, Artificer's speed makes doing that so much easier. Sure, I could just slow down, but the majority of the fun with Artificer is the movement. But even worse than that are off-screen scavs. Don't even have to walk into them for them to kill you without notice. They have range and eyes that don't rely on fixed camera shots. It's likely that you will be speared by a scavenger you didn't even get a chance to see at least once, and that just feels bad. That's why I opened the review of Artificer with the line I did. It's so fun at the start, but even though it's potentially one of the shortest campaigns if you head straight for the objective, by the end I'm ready for it to be over. Yes, I think you should still play it. The Artificer's story is really great, their abilities are fun, and it has some good novelty, getting to play with explosives and scavs. But is it my favorite? No. It's hard to say, but I think a strong contender for that title is... The Rivulet is quite simple to explain. It's like playing Survivor on cocaine. The Rivulet can run nearly twice as fast, jump twice as far, is moist and clammy, but can only be active for 5 minutes at a time. Alright, that's it for Rivulet, let's wrap it up. Okay, yes, Rivulet is exceedingly simple compared to all the other slugcats, but there are still a couple of quirks of their campaign to talk about. Rivulet is the speedrunning character with the fastest movement in the game, so fast it can be an issue sometimes, but this fun gimmick is central to your survival. Once your shelter opens, you only have 3 to 5 minutes before the rain comes again, which is less than half the time you usually get. Even with their frankly absurd extra speed, this is barely enough time to find food and shelter, while still avoiding the plentiful predators. Especially considering Rivulet has the strictest food requirements of all the slugcats, needing 5 pips of food to hibernate and only being able to store 1 pip for the next cycle. Rivulet is the ultimate test of map knowledge. At this point you've probably beaten the game 4 or 5 times already, and should know the map like the back of your hand. And you're going to need that because even with that knowledge you're going to be cutting it close. Make use of Rivulet's increased speed and jump distance to cut corners and get into shortcuts that would otherwise be inaccessible. Leap over and past predators so fast they don't even get a chance to grab you, and snag some food while on the run, you might just make it. That being said, the rain isn't as much of a threat to Rivulet as the other slugs. They will still get turned into turquoise mush under direct rainfall, but swimming through flooded tunnels is not a problem because Rivulet has one final trick up their sleeve. You may notice they have these gills sticking out of their face, a clear reference to this creature from Minecraft, allowing Rivulet to survive underwater. Now, they can't actually breathe underwater and will still drown, but their incredibly increased lung capacity allows you to take your time and look around while submerged, especially because Rivulet is also a fast swimmer. and you better get used to swimming because a good third of Rivulet's campaign is going to be underwater. This is an entirely different experience than what can be found with any other slugcat. Water is usually something to be avoided if possible due to leaving you basically defenseless and in danger of drowning, so you rarely get the chance to interact with the swimming mechanics or aquatic predators like the Leviathan or the newly added Aquapede. But Rivulet gives you an even playing field. Being stuck in open water with the Leviathan is no longer a death sentence. Now you can actually avoid them with some skilled movement. I, for one, think this is a great novelty on its own, even without the fun of sprinting over land. One last mechanic to bring up for Rivulet are shelter failures. If this is your first time hearing about this mechanic, I bet your heart just sank a little, but it's really not as bad as it sounds. Sometimes when you rest in a shelter, the door will open early, letting you out while the rain is still happening. This rain isn't as deadly. It alternates between a heavy downpour that will push you to the ground and a lighter rain that barely has an effect on you. Interior areas of the map may also still be partially flooded and need to be either swam through or left alone until they drain. Eventually the rain will stop, the rooms will drain, and the cycle will continue as normal. It's a fairly simple concept, but there are a couple side effects to note. The first one being that you can't return to the shelter that the failure started from, and you have to find a new one. The second is that the start of the cycle's timer is delayed. For the Rivulet, this could mean that a shelter failure actually doubles the amount of time you have to move before the cycle ends, allowing you to cover a significant distance if you can deal with the rain and flooding. So really, a shelter failure is a nice time bonus for you. The rain is really not hard to avoid, just stand under something while it pours, and you're going to be using that extra time to get distance anyway, so not being able to use a shelter twice in a row isn't much of an inconvenience unless you're karma farming. Shelter failures aren't actually a unique mechanic for Rivulet and can rarely occur for any slugcat. Rivulet just gets them far more often and they are therefore a prominent feature of the campaign, so I figured it would be best to talk about them here. In my opinion, Rivulet's part of the story is also the best so far, though I have to say that the next two slugcats continue to up the ante. Final closing notes, oh yeah, Rivulet can also pop bubble fruit with their moist, sweaty hands, which I guess is sort of convenient. And I hope you previously enjoyed traversing unfortunate development.
Tyler, there's rot.
Alright, next up is another combat character, so let's get started on... In the ranking of simplicity, the Spearmaster's abilities are slightly more complex than the Rivulet, but far simpler than Artificer and Gourmand. The Spearmaster's primary ability is to excrete bone needle spears from their tail, which looks and sounds like it doesn't hurt at all. This can be done at any time by just standing still for a second and holding the grab button, and there is no limit on how many spears you can create. Spearmaster has the same base stats as Hunter, meaning higher movement speed and spear damage, but has an additional bonus of being able to wield a spear in each hand, because a Spearmaster is yet another carnivorous slugcat. But Spearmaster has one more little complication. For whatever godforsaken reason, Spearmaster does not have a mouth. This creates a couple of problems we'll come back to, but the main one is that eating becomes a bit of an issue. So to bypass a mouth, Spearmaster's spears have a thin vein that connects them back to the body. When a spear hits a creature, it sucks the thing's life juices through that strand and gives them to the Spearmaster, the sin against nature that they are. In short, to get food pips, you stab living creatures with your spears. This is less efficient than just eating corpses, since each hit only gives you one pip and things tend to die in 2 to 3 stabs, but it does mean you don't have to kill things. You can just stick something a couple times, and if it manages to get away, or if you have to get away, or if it falls into a pit, you still get 2 food pips for your trouble. However, to get food from a hit, the spear has to be fresh. If you throw or drop a spear, its connection will be severed and will not give you any food when used, so make sure to re-up on your spears whenever you can. Besides that, the spears act like any other spear and can be used as normal to kill and make poles to climb on. But due to having an infinite supply of spears, this mechanic can be taken to the extreme to create full spear ladders if you so desire. Infinite ammo is also a great thing in combat for obvious reasons, and you will be glad to have infinite ammo. Going back to Spearmaster's horrifying lack of mouth, despite being able to carry 2 spears at once, they actually can carry less items overall. Remember how every other slugcat can store items in their stomach by swallowing them? That's kind of tricky for the Spearmaster. Spearmaster's last unique characteristic is rather simple, their food pips. They have the second highest amount of pips just behind Gourmand at 10 total, but they are evenly split with 5 being necessary to rest and the other 5 stored for the next cycle. This makes Spearmaster the only slugcat able to hibernate twice in a row without eating anything. This trait doesn't come in helpful often, but it does have its benefits, namely making karma farming much easier if you need it, which you likely will. Spearmaster's campaign is the most brutal of the bunch. This is a no-holds-barred journey where the game will throw everything, including several serrated kitchen sinks at you. Partly this is because having a lot of things to throw spears at is necessary for Spearmaster to get food, but also this is the penultimate campaign and the last one to test your combat prowess in. It's still pretty doable, but expect one hell of a challenge. One word of advice though, maybe avoid garbage wastes. It's bad. Spearmaster's storyline is very, very plot heavy. They are the only Downpour slugcat to get an Overseer guide, and this one is cherry flavored instead of lemon. Spearmaster's story is damn good. When the final bombshell of their story lands, it tees up the final campaign of Downpour. Welcome to the end of the game, the final campaign, the last story, and the little fuzzy green critter to see it all through. Saint's campaign comes with an array of new mechanics and the length to get to know them well. Their primarily showcased ability is their tongue, which in short acts like a grapple worm permanently attached to your face. In long, the tongue has finer control and more versatility than your standard grapple worm, allowing you to be significantly more maneuverable. You can actually aim where the grapple shoots somewhat, manually adjust the length to pull yourself out of dangerous reach, and have decent control over yourself while hanging to create momentum, and can attach to pulls and creatures for creative movements. I love using the grapple worm already, so of course I found having an upgraded one as a permanent ability incredibly fun. This extra mobility is needed by Saint for a couple reasons, and of course the first is to avoid predators. The Saint's campaign is certainly designed to feel like a finale. While not as purely hellish as Spearmaster's campaign can be, Saints is filled with swarms of serpents and billions of bugs and is certainly no cakewalk. On the upside, a few of the more common troublesome varieties have very little presence, but on the downside, spitter spiders. So many. And it's not just them. While many of the staple hard mode enemies are missing, there's still plenty of horrid shit that you're not used to dealing with. Who the fuck decided that filtration system needed drop wigs in it? Shoreline was already bad, but now the water is cold and somehow has worse vultures. And your grapple, Saint's only saving grace, is useless because there's no ceilings anywhere. Stop putting vultures in Shoreline! Also, stun effects make the Saint convulse for much longer than normal and sap nearly all of their breath away. Don't ask how I know this. Stop looking at the screen. In most regions, Saint's main antagonists are invertebrates, while lizards and vultures take a little bit of a backseat. This seems like a decent deal to me. Spiders die very easily and most centipedes aren't much harder to kill, but Saint has what I like to call a loser's attitude, and as such has taken a vow of pacifism. They are incapable of throwing spears, instead just weakly tossing them with their little noodle arms. The inability to even try and eliminate threats, especially spitter spiders, is, to put it diplomatically, fucking awful, especially coming off the previous campaign where spears were literally falling out of your ass. The Saint can still throw rocks and other projectiles, but evasion is the only reliable tool you have. Spore puffs can't be found in most regions, and rocks are much harder to use than normal, because Saint instantly dies if bitten by any lizard with zero chance of escape. Additionally, the Saint is incapable of gaining food pips from eating small creatures like bat flies or centipedes, which cuts the available food pretty significantly, which doubly sucks when added to the Saints' second huge change that was probably the very first thing you noticed. It's Christmas time in hell! The snow is a cool visual makeover for the regions, no pun intended, but it also has significant gameplay effects. Firstly, food is harder to come by. Even though Saint has the lowest food requirements in the game besides Monk, this is the only campaign I was ever really worried about starvation in, because somehow, this is worse for plants to survive in than the bullet rain. To that point, you're no longer racing against an incoming rainstorm. You're instead racing against the Saint freezing to death in Arctic temperatures. Whenever Saint is outside, they will start losing color and turning blue before eventually dying of organ failure. To prevent this, you have to maintain their body temperature. Mainly, this is done by holding or swallowing a lantern and sitting somewhere not exposed to the elements, until your warmth pips refill and your fellow returns to a healthy shade of green. Because there is no rain in this world anymore, there is no cycle timer around Saint's karma icon. Instead, the longer you spend in a cycle, the worse the snow will get until a powerful blizzard starts to blow through, freezing you to death in a matter of seconds as long as you're outside, even if you have a lantern. While the storm is still very deadly, it isn't as immediately lethal as the rain and has very little effect on rooms underground, and so can be worked around to continue making some progress even if it's in full swing. Unfortunately though, this blizzard starts to ramp up quickly, so you're gonna have to move fast. As though waiting for reindeer to arrive needed to be worse. This takes some getting used to, and I won't lie, it's a bit annoying at the start. The cold really limits your traversal speed, which sucks because swinging around with your Spider-Man tongue is my favorite movement mechanic, but being outside slowly kills you. It also forces you to permanently occupy one of your few storage spots with a lantern to keep from dying within 2 minutes of leaving your shelter. Make sure not to lose it! It's not the worst, especially once you get out of the starting areas of Sky Islands and Farm Arrays. Once I got used to it, I thought it was actually a pretty good way to shake up the game's usual formula for the final campaign. Because, yeah, Saint is the ending of Rain World, and that's sort of bittersweet. I'm sure there's some debate over whether or not it's a good send-off and whatnot, but if you want my opinion, and since you've stuck around this long I assume you do, I love it. The wild twists and new regions that appear for the Saint are incredible and genuinely blew me away the first time I saw them. I even enjoyed the final region, which I know some people really dislike. As for the ending itself, it's pretty good. I briefly remarked on the individual slugcat storylines, but I'd like to give a more general overview and, more specifically, how that has changed the game. I made a joke earlier about this being Rain World's story mode. Well, this image is a bit, the sentiment is not. Yes, the base game had a loose narrative progression to follow and a bunch of lore to piece together, but largely the driving force was exploration and survival. It was, in a way, a kind of sandbox experience where part of the fun was figuring out how it all worked. Sure, there is an ending, but it leaves a lot up to interpretation, and afterwards there's nothing stopping you from going back and continuing to explore, because there are almost certainly parts of the map you haven't been to yet. The point I'm trying to make here is that it didn't really need a story to be compelling, and some people think it's better because it doesn't have one. And so, Downpour is slightly contentious. And just for clarity, I do want to emphasize there's a difference between story and lore, at least in the context that I'm using them in. There's plenty of lore to be found in the base game with all the different pearls, but that's not really a plot line. Each of the new slugcats, kind of excluding Gourmand and Artificer, play a distinct part in an overarching plot that is much more in your face and doesn't require a lore dive to figure out. The issue that some people have with this is that it starts to feel like you are the protagonist. In the base game, you are a pathetic little worm creature, trying to survive in a world filled with creatures bigger and stronger than you, occasionally stumbling into something you couldn't fully comprehend. And in Downpour, you can fart explosions and go to war against an entire species. There's certainly a power difference there, and I can't say that the game's vibes are unchanged. Like, the most significant impact that either the monk or survivor has in the world is if they decide to bring a few handfuls of neuron flies to Moon. Everything else in their journeys is completely inconsequential, and it could be argued that handing a couple extra neurons to Moon also means next to nothing. But in Downpour, even the Gourmand, who has the least plot relevance of the bunch, kickstarts a series of events that change things in the world. But is that really such a bad thing? My take on it is this. Yes, it does alter the core experience of Rain World, but in a way that is necessary for Downpour to be good. Exploring the Rain World was very fun and exciting the first, second, even third time around, but eventually that begins to wear off. Even trying to collect more than a couple lore pearls seems tiring to me. After a while, I'm gonna need something more than just swimming through shoreline for the nth time while praying jetfish don't knock the pearls from my hands. Even the base game recognized this with Hunter. They're a new, powered-up slugcat with a whole new game mode, a time trial to hit up all the big landmarks and end the game before your cycles run out, and events in Hunter's campaign are plot significant. Downpour just took that concept and expanded it. Even though Rain World is one of my favorite games, I couldn't see myself playing through it 5 more times just to have a go with some new abilities. At least not for a while. But the story it was telling kept me coming back again and again. I would argue that while there is a bit of main character syndrome with the new slugcats, they are not the main focus of the story. When I talk about Downpour, the slugcats are an addendum to a story about 2 dying gods, one broken and one rotting, trying to come to terms with their fates, the world, and each other. That is until, of course, we get to the Saint. That being said, there's still plenty of esoteric lore to find and piece together if that's more your thing. Lots of new pearls and other collectible tidbits are scattered about, and you can even get a second perspective on the old ones in a particular campaign. All in all, I think the more story-centric twist on Rain World was a necessary one that I personally enjoy, but I also understand that it messes with the unique vibe of the base game in a way that others might not like. And that wraps up my thoughts on the new campaigns. So, we're done here, right? No, shit, yeah, Now this may come as a shock, but co-op is a huge selling point for Downpour. In many ways, it's exactly what you might expect from co-op Rain World, but there are a couple of quirks to it that I need to go over.
Just keep going, there's nowhere to hide.
Oh, shit!
Run, motherfucker, run!
Ooh.
The very first important note is this. It's local co-op only. Hey, don't look so disappointed, this is actually not that bad. There's a feature on Steam called Remote Play that allows you to play local multiplayer online by essentially live streaming the game to your friend and linking their controls to your computer, which isn't perfect, but works. The upside to all this is that your co-op partner doesn't need to own the DLC, or even the base game to play with you. I got a couple of my friends into Rain World by playing co-op with them, and I'm glad I now have someone who I can ramble lore at who vaguely understands what I'm talking about.
Hey Pants, thanks for getting in front of my fucking screen. That's me slapping the cat, do you hear it?
Yes, it sounds way too meaty to be slapping a cat.
In terms of gameplay, co-op is still mostly the Rain World experience we all know and love, but having multiple slugcats hopping around does obviously change things. Before you even start the game, you are given a number of new options to tweak that mostly revolve around the co-op experience. You can select from any of the Downpour slugcats you have unlocked to play as and customize their colors, which is quite nice, but the main one I'm going to go over is the difficulty option, ranging from easy to hard. On easy, you only need one surviving slugcat to make it to a shelter to hibernate. On medium, you need to recover all dead players' bodies to hibernate, and hard means that all players need to be alive to hibernate. The game is generally made easier with a second, third, or fourth pair of hands to throw and hold things with. The ability to use teamwork to take down threats and save each other from danger is very real. This is doubly so if you decide to play as Downpour slugcats, who are generally much more fit for combat and survival. You don't even have to worry about having 2 mouths to feed, as you share one collective stomach via Bluetooth that is the same size it usually is in the campaign you're playing through. But there are some less obvious ways in which the game is made harder through the mere fact of it being co-op. First, some fine control is lost by having more cooks in the kitchen, so to speak. The best way to demonstrate this is with platforming. You may be good at platforming in this game, but any weak links can be left behind and hold up the game. If one of you is carrying something important and falls off the map, there is no getting it back. The surviving players will also have to die in order for the cycle to restart with the item returned. This is even worse if you turn the co-op difficulty any higher than easy, as any player falling into any pit is a failed cycle. To that point, a predator can snatch just one of you and run off, and any difficulty higher than easy, you will have to give chase and catch it before it gets to its shelter and makes the body unrecoverable. Not to mention all the types of enemies that just straight up eat corpses and leave nothing to even try and save. While this does give Rain World some of its teeth back, I personally do not find any co-op difficulty higher than easy fun. On medium and above, your dipshit friends can become a huge liability, no offense to any of you who may be watching, and having to restart the cycle every time one person in your group fucks up a jump can be frustrating. But that's not really a genuine problem with the co-op since it's completely optional to turn on. The only real problem I have found with co-op is, stop me if you've heard this one before, the camera. Rain World's fixed camera is exponentially worse in co-op for the exact same reasons as the base game, but amplified by the number of people you're playing with. Do you hate being killed by an enemy just off screen that you couldn't see until you walked into it? Well, what if you were off screen and couldn't see what killed you at all? How about pipes taking you off to the next room and the camera sticking to the room you just left? I hate it. How it works is that each player can switch the focus of the camera to them at the press of a button, so if you really need to see what you're doing, you can, at the expense of everyone else. It's really not a great solution. To be completely fair to the game though, it was never designed for this, and the system in place was probably the best they could do. But other people can do better. The SV Camera Scroll mod, which is linked in the description, makes the camera approximately 85% better by smoothly following you instead of snapping from screen to screen. This way, it's much harder for you to lose yourself or your friend due to camera shenanigans. Don't try to suffer through co-op unmodded, it's not worth it. That's the end of the gameplay changes of co-op, but there's one last thing I need to bring up. You can only play co-op in the base game campaigns, meaning Monk, Survivor, and Hunter. This was a bit disappointing to me, and I don't know why the Downpour campaigns couldn't be available. Maybe there's some technical reasons, but it sucks all the same. However, mods come to save the day again. Unshackled Co-op allows you to play as anyone in any campaign, mostly bug-free, which I will also link in the description. With my problem solved with mods, I give co-op a hearty recommendation. It is certainly a different experience to playing solo, but any game with friends is fun.
Don't.
So, now we're done talking about Downpour and it's time for the conclusion. Wait, where's my title graphic? Oh, shit, yeah, I completely forgot about the... And that's not entirely a bit. I did genuinely forget that the arena challenges and expedition were a thing until I played through the game again for this video. So it may come as no surprise when I say I don't really have much to say about these. The arena was something that was already in the base game, though I wouldn't blame you for not knowing what it is. It's mostly what it sounds like. You're placed in a contained room with a set number of creatures and food items with the goal of racking up as many points as possible before time runs out. Or play with a friend to collaborate, compete, or fight with. There's not much to it and never really touched it before. Arena challenges are new. They're basically preset arenas with specifically designed goals for you to complete instead of just getting points. There are challenges for every slugcat in the game which are unlocked once you beat the respective campaign, and these challenges are very diverse. Kill a bunch of lizards, avoid a swarm of spiders while trying to catch batflies, tame a lizard, try to keep children from sticking a fork in electrical death coils, use a flare gun to try and find food in a pitch black room with a vulture in it, lure lizards into monster kelp, and more. A lot of them are actually quite fun, but some of them are very, well, challenging is the polite way to put it. The challenges are fine, I enjoyed them, but that's all there really is to say about them. Expedition mode is a lot of things. It's sort of a half roguelite mode where you select a slugcat to play as and get a number of randomly generated goals to complete within their campaign. If you run out of karma before you complete these goals, you lose the expedition and have to restart from the beginning. Once you complete these challenges, you get points that can be spent on modifiers to upgrade your slugcat's abilities in your next run. And, of course, expeditions can also be played in co-op. This seems like a cool idea and a good way to give the game some extra replayability, but in all honesty, I just bounced right off it. I don't entirely know why, either. It's not like I don't enjoy just playing the game and exploring, but for some reason, not having a significant goal to move towards just kills my motivation. Yes, there are goals, and yes, I know how and where to achieve them, but I just don't want to. This might just be a me problem, but I'd be interested to hear if anyone else felt this way about Expedition. To sum up my thoughts on Arena and Expedition in general, they're fine, I guess, but I never really had much drive to actually play them besides the desire to get 100% completion for Rain World. Alright, that's it. It's conclusion time, baby. Let's go! What is it now? There it is. One last game mode to cover. Safari is a very interesting mode that no other game can do like Rain World can. In my video on the base game, I said that I enjoyed watching all the other creatures interact with each other. That is exactly what Safari mode is for. Simply watch the creatures shuffle about and do their thing. Lock onto one and follow them around for the whole cycle and see what kind of shenanigans they get up to. Or take direct control of any creature you can lock onto and play as them if you want. Finally, you can play Rain World in Noodlefly mode. The controls for creatures are a little wacky and imprecise, since the creatures aren't really designed for a player to control, but they're generally workable, which is impressive given that fact. Safari mode is cool, but the novelty of it is rather limited. It's just a fun extra thing, and there's no reason for it to be anything but that. Just keep a lookout for red unlocked diamonds when you're playing the campaigns to get regions for Safari mode, which is kind of annoying, but that's just how it goes. And yeah, I think that's it for real this time. Let's wrap this thing up in the... Do I think Rain World Downpour is worth it? Short answer, yes. Long answer, it depends on what exactly you enjoyed about the base game. If you liked being a helpless worm with no incredible abilities, struggling to survive against all odds in a world you barely understand, you might not enjoy Downpour as much. But if you don't mind becoming a little bit more of a main character, then I think the story and gameplay are worth it. With a little help from modders, co-op is a great way to get your friends into Rain World, and is a fun, albeit different, gameplay experience all the way through. All the little additions and the challenges, expedition, and safari are welcome, even if they're not major selling points to me. I love this game, and Downpour helped me love it more, so why don't you give it a try? And with that, there is no more Rain World to cover. There will be more videos to come at some point, but I refuse to ever give a time frame again. Subscribe to be told when I next decide to surprise you with another one. Goodbye. You gotta be fucking kidding.